Good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. We'll begin the meeting now. I believe our live stream is up and running. I'll begin with the opening prayer and statement of acknowledgement. Almighty God, we pray for your blessing upon this council, help and prosper its work for the advancement and benefit of its people, so that peace and happiness, unity and justice may be established among us all. Amen.
Amen.
Manningham Council acknowledges the Wurundjeri people as the traditional custodians of the land we now know as Manningham. I'd also like to welcome this evening former councillor Meg Downey, who has joined us on the line. We pay our respects to Wurundjeri elders past and present and value the ongoing contribution to the cultural heritage of Manningham. Council would also like to acknowledge the contribution made to Manningham over the years by people of diverse backgrounds and cultures. I welcome all members of the public to this council meeting this evening who have joined us online to observe proceedings. In response to the evolving coronavirus situation, changes have been made to the Local Government Act which permit council meetings to be held virtually for a limited time. The health and safety of our community employees is our priority during these uncertain times, so we will continue to hold our meetings virtually to further reduce the risk of transmission of COVID-19. You will notice a few changes to how we are conducting our meetings. You will not be able to attend the meeting in person, however, you are able to watch the meeting live through Council's website and Facebook page. You can also watch the recording anytime after the meeting at a time that suits you via the Council website. The agenda and minutes of the meetings are also available in the same location. We are still taking questions from the public and encourage you to submit your questions in accordance with our normal practices prior to the start of the meeting. As you cannot be present in the chamber to read your question, you can elect to dial in and ask your question, or you can have your question read out loud by our CEO. A response will be provided where we have the information to hand. If we're unable to provide a meaningful response, we will take your question on notice and provide a response in writing. We will deal with a maximum of 2 questions per person and 2 questions on any one issue. If you have more than 2 questions, please submit these additional questions in writing to Council through the normal channels. Finally, I would like to advise that if we experience technical issues during the meeting, we will make every attempt to resolve them within 30 minutes. If we are unable to resolve the issue, the meeting will be adjourned to another date and time. A notice will be placed on the Council's website advising the meeting has been adjourned and when it is expected to reconvene. All council meetings are governed by meeting procedure local law. I will introduce each item of business as listed on the agenda, calling it by number and reading it by the title. I will then call for a mover and seconder of a motion on the item before opening any debate. Only councillors are able to join the debate on an item. Councillors may adopt the officer's recommendation in the report or propose amendments and supplementary motions. Item 2, apologies and requests for leave of absence. So I'd now like to confirm councillor attendance, and I will do so by name. Councillor Mike Zafiropoulos. Present. Councillor Anna Chen. Present. Councillor Andrew Conlon.
I am here.
Present, thank you. Councillor Sophie Galbally. She's here. Councillor Jeff Goff.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Dot Haynes. Thank you. Councillor Michelle Kleinert.
Present.
And Councillor Paula Piccinini.
Present.
Thank you all. There are no apologies. Thank you all for your attendance this evening. Item 3, prior notification of conflict of interest. No prior notifications of conflict of interest have been received. Councillors, would anyone like to give notice of a conflict of interest at this point in time? I say no indication from anyone that they would like to do so, so we shall proceed accordingly. Item 4, confirmation of minutes. Do I have a mover for this particular matter?
Yes, I'm happy to move that.
Councillor Conlon, thank you.
Sorry, wrong page.
Right.
I'd like to move that the minutes of the special meeting of council held on 21st of July 2020 and the ordinary meeting of council held on 28th of July 2020 be confirmed, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kleiner. I'll put the motion. Those for? Thank you, councillors. I see all hands are raised. That motion is therefore carried. Item 5, presentations. There are no presentations. Item 6, petitions. 6.1, Save Warrandyte off-leash dog walk. Do I have a mover for this particular matter?
Yes,
Councillor
Mr. Mayor.
Piccinini.
Thank you. I move that the petition of 640 signatures from residents of Manningham, Victoria and locations across Australia to keep the current rules of dogs permitting off-leash and under effective control along the Yarra River walking trail in Warrandyte be received and referred through to the appropriate officer for consideration.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder?
I second.
Thank you. I will put the motion. Those for? Thank you, councillors. I see all hands are raised. That motion is carried. Item 6.2, Save Gooley Gulch Playground. Do I have a mover for this particular matter?
Sorry. Yes, I'd like to move.
Thank you, Councillor Conlon.
My apologies, but I'd like to move that the petition with 227 signatories from residents of Manningham, Victoria and locations across Australia to save the Gooley Gulch Playground in Wonga Park be received and referred through to the appropriate officer for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Galbaldine. I'll therefore put the motion. Councillors, those for? Those against? I see all hands are raised. That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Item 7, public question time. We have received a number of questions for tonight's council meeting. At this time, anyone submitting a question to council is not required to be present. Tonight, we will be trialling something a bit different to our previous meetings. We have given people with the option of dialing in to ask their question directly to council or to have their question read by the CEO. We have 4 people on the line who have asked to read their own questions and make a brief introductory statement. Our first question comes from Mrs. Meg Downey. Mrs. Downey, you have 2 minutes to introduce and then ask your questions. Please proceed. So for the officers, I will just unmute that call. If the officers would just like to make sure that Mrs. Downey is in the meeting so that she can then proceed.
My name's Doreen Burge and I'm representing FOMDAC on behalf of Meg Downey.
Could you just bear with us for a second, please, Ms. Burge? So, councillors, there's apparently a bit of a technical issue which the officers will sort out for Mrs. Downey. So we'll come back to her question in a moment and we'll proceed with the second question from Mrs. Doreen Burge. So, Mrs. Burge, would you please proceed? Sorry, councillors, please bear with us a second as we sort the technology out. So we are not hearing either of the questioners. We're going to pause there for a minute, councillors, while we figure out what's going on. Mm-hmm. Great.
Can you hear me? This is Naomi.
Yeah, okay. Yes, Naomi, we can hear you now. So we would
Okay.
proceed on your item. So just give me pause for 1 second, Naomi.
Yep, that's okay. I just wanted to test it.
That's great. So you are live in the council meeting and live on the Facebook stream as well, Naomi.
Sure. So do you
So
want me to go ahead?
you have a couple of minutes to introduce your question.
Yep.
And then proceed. Please go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity, everyone, for allowing us to come online and ask questions. I'm a resident, obviously, in Manningham, and I'm aware that council have increased the rates by 2% recently during COVID. And I just wanted to know what assistance council is giving ratepayers besides the $100 concession for ratepayers that have a concession card and the freeze on rent for sporting clubs, which includes electricity costs. Is there any other additional support there for residents?
Thank you for your question, Naomi. I will refer that question to Andrew Day, the Chief Executive Officer, who may refer it to another officer.
Yeah, thank you for your question, Naomi. I might actually hand that over to the Director of Shared Services, Mr. Philip Lee, to respond and provide a little bit more information on that.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for your question, Naomi. The council is providing a lot more relief beyond what you've mentioned. By applying the state government's rate cap, council's been able to provide a more targeted COVID-19 financial relief package to our broader community. And the package actually provides $3 million of support in 2021, in addition to $800,000 in 1920. The following targeted measures will ensure the most effective relief to those who we believe need it most. Some of these measures, Naomi, include a special payment arrangement for those experiencing financial hardship, no increase in the waste charge in 2021, despite the cost increases to council from the state government, an increase in the low income rate rebate, additional support services for older residents, 50% discount on footpath trading permits in 2021, 50% discount on trader parking permits in 2021, 50% discount on food premises registration in 2021, 50% discount on health premises registrations in 2021 as well, and the introduction of a local business development program to help our community businesses, rental and lease relief and subsidies on utility costs for clubs and community groups as well. And also the introduction of a COVID-19 community relief fund. So there's some of the key relief measures that council has put in place.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I've got a second question when you're ready. Thank you very much for that information.
So I think,
my
thank you,
second
Mr. Lee. That the one other thing I would add is that community relief fund is being used to provide a suite of grants, access to grants by a diverse range of community organisations. We've already provided financial relief to quite a number of community support relief organisations such as DonCare and other such organisations who provide a range of support services in our community. In addition to the rental relief that we've provided them, we've provided grants to those organisations so that they can continue to provide their important social support services in our community. We've provided grants to organisations that are providing food relief in the community, for example. And there is a second round of those grants available open. They've just closed, I believe, and the grants are being assessed at the moment by the council staff. And I expect that soon there'll be another phase of those grants going out to community support organisations across the city.
Sure. Right, thank you. I've got that second question if you want me to fire away.
Yes, please, Naomi.
Wonderful. Okay, so I just have a question in relation to family violence. So I work in that field, and you probably won't be able to give me this information right now, but obviously over the COVID period, we've seen an increase in family violence across the board. And we know we are in the midst of a pandemic, but at the moment, family violence is an epidemic. And I just wanted to know if Manningham could actually supply some statistics in regards to the family violence and frontline call-outs for emergency services that are responding to that, because I know other councils have that available, and I'm wondering whether Manningham can actually provide those statistics on their website or somewhere.
Great, thank you for the question. I will refer that question to Niall Sheedy, who's the Acting Director of City Planning and Community, to respond.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Oakley, for your question. It's fair to say COVID-19 has had a significant impact on a broad spectrum of issues in our community, including, unfortunately, family violence. When reviewing statistics on family violence, it's important to review a number of different sources to gain an accurate understanding of trends. You no doubt are aware that some of these sources include publicly available information from Crime Statistics Agency Victoria, as well as information from more local levels within our eastern region. Council's Community Development Officer will make contact with you in the coming days to assist in sourcing information, and we'll also explore how best we can provide that information to the general public.
Perfect. That's fantastic. Thank you very much.
For you, Mayor, as well, if I could just add to that as well, Naomi, we're very conscious of that, and Council's very conscious of that, and actually are meeting regularly with Victoria Police as well to make sure that we're across a number of issues that are emerging in the community, including family violence. So I want to assure you that that's occurring on a regular basis.
Great. Thank you very much. That's excellent. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, team, for the responses, and thank you very much for the question, Ms. Oakley.
Thank you for your time. Thank you.
You're welcome. So we'll now move to the next question, and I believe we have Downey, who is ready to ask her question. Please proceed, Mrs. Downey.
Yes, look, my name's Doreen Burge, and I'm actually asking this question. I've been nominated by Friends of Manningham Dogs and Cats to ask the question, and for some reason the message didn't get through from Carrie Bruce that it was to be me who was asking the question. So I hope that is okay. It was approved this afternoon by email.
That's fine, Ms. Burge. We're happy to have you ask the question that we have here before us. Please proceed. You have a couple of minutes to introduce if you choose, and then ask your question.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. My question is, and then I'll give a little bit of background, is why has FOMDAC, Friends of Manningham Dogs and Cats, not been invited to have representation on the newly established Ruffy Lake Park Master Plan Project Reference Group? Now, just a little bit of background to that. FOMDAC has had representation on previous Ruffy Lake Park advisory committees. At one point, I was one of FOMDAC's representatives on an advisory committee for Ruffy Lake Park. Dog owners are stakeholders in the park. As everyone will be aware, it's one of the main off-leash dog walking areas in Manningham. So as such, the Master Plan project has major significance to dog owners of Manningham, and dog issues form part of the draft of the new management strategy. FOMDAC has been involved in developing and implementing Manningham's initial domestic animal strategy, which has now become the Domestic Animal Management Plan. And we started as an advisory group in the 1990s and have continued on as an advisory role to council on dog and cat issues. So that's really just the background. I think it's very important to continue representation, to come to mutually agreeable decisions about dog access in Ruffy Lake Park.
You're on mute, Paul.
Thank you very much. That's not supposed to happen. So I'll refer, thank you very much for your question, Ms. Burge. I will refer that matter to Niall Sheedy, who is the Acting Director of City Planning and Community, to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Burge, for your question. Officers certainly acknowledge the participation and contribution by FOMDAC to the previous Ruffy Lake Park Advisory Committee and the development of Council's Domestic Animal Management Plan. The Ruffy Lake Park Master Plan Reference Group was advertised via expressions of interest in November of last year, with a total of 17 applications received for the 7 available community member positions in the group. In assessing the application against the membership criteria, unfortunately in this case, FOMDAC was not successful. Having said that, in November of this year, the draft master plan will be available for community consultation. At this time, opportunities will be provided to consider feedback from a range of community groups and individuals and groups, of course, such as FOMDAC and the wider community. So we certainly welcome FOMDAC's contribution at that stage. But unfortunately, with a limited number of positions available in the reference group, FOMDAC was unsuccessful.
Great, thank you for the advice, Niall. Now, I have here, Ms. Burge, that you had a second question, but I think that second question is really being dealt with.
Yes. I'm assuming you can hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Yes, okay. No, look, I had framed a similar question too, just as an individual, so that I wanted to represent FOMDAC on this, so it covers the same ground. Okay. I'm curious to know why FOMDAC was unsuccessful, but maybe that's not a question for now.
Well, you're certainly welcome to speak to the officers further, and we would greatly appreciate FOMDAC's input into the public exhibition phase of the master plan. We expect to have a wide range of community engaging with that master plan process and providing us sage counsel on just how we should proceed, or the council should proceed, with the development of facilities within the Ruffy Lake Park. The draft plan is the most interesting one, and it will continue the position of Ruffy Lake as the premier park within our municipality, I expect. And we greatly value your contribution.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Burge. Okay, we will now move to the next questioner. I believe we have Mrs. Downey online and able to talk. Could you confirm that you're able to speak, Ms. Downey? You might need to try hitting *6 on your phone, Mrs. Downey, to unlock a particular feature to allow you to be heard. If you could perhaps try that on the keypad of your phone. Okay, well, I'm not sure if Mrs. Downey can actually hear us, so we might move to the next questioner on the list, who's, while the officer try and sort that particular thing out, because we'd like to hear from Mrs. Downey this evening. Just taking the trouble to ask us a question. The next questioner on the list, I believe, is Mrs. Stella Yee. So perhaps if we can go to Ms. Yee's question. Once again, if you'd care to acknowledge that you can hear us. If you can't, then please speak up. No? Just excuse me for a second, councillors. I have one of the staff on the line. Pause.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Stella. We can hear you.
Okay, good. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Day, and councillors.
Good evening.
In the
Welcome
annual
to the
budget-
meeting. Welcome to the meeting this evening. We do appreciate your time. So as usual, Ms. Yee, you have a couple of minutes to introduce your questions before proceeding. So we can hear you quite clearly. Please proceed.
Thank you. In the annual budget for 2021, which has been adopted, Manningham Council has budgeted a surplus of 12.6 million. 3 million of this is achieved through a rate increase. If Council has taken the opportunity to provide some relief to residents by freezing rates, they would still achieve a surplus of 9.6 million. Instead, councillors voted unanimously to raise rates by 2%, the maximum amount allowed this financial year. As we all know, Australia is facing the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, and the latest labour force figures show that more than 1 million Australians are out of work. Undeniably, this is a time of great financial stress for many. Given this context, why did councillors choose to add to the financial and mental stress of residents by raising the council rates? Can councillors say that they truly represent the community when they decided to vote for a larger surplus over the welfare of Manningham residents during this once-in-a-century pandemic? Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your questions, Ms. Yee. I will pass the first question, why did councillors choose to add to the financial, etc., to the Director of Shared Services, Mr. Philip Lee, for a response.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much for your question, Stella. I'll try it requires a little bit of detail to answer your question, but I'll give it my best shot. In responding to the effects of COVID-19 pandemic and in planning for the 2021 budget, both councillors and officers considered how we could most effectively serve the community from now and into the future. And Council has considered our longer term financial sustainability to ensure that we can continue to deliver on community needs and to provide the financial support to those most in need that I outlined a little earlier to our other caller, Naomi. For financial year 2021, Council, as you have pointed out, has followed the state government's rate cap and applied a 2% increase in rates. And this equates to a $36 per year or 69 cents per week to our residents. On average, correct. And really, it's this 2% is in line with the rate increases applied by the vast majority of councils across metropolitan Melbourne. Specifically to the surplus, as I move into that, I won't go through the measures again, but the impact of COVID-19 on council services has costed us an estimated $5 million over the 1920 and 2021 financial years. And after having accounted for these impacts and for Council's $3 million COVID-19 financial relief package in 2021, Council, as you rightly point out, is left with a budgeted surplus of $12.6 million. Now, it's important for us to understand what is in this $12.6 million surplus. There are three main components to this, Stella. $6.9 million of monetary contributions income from developers are within that $12.6 million. So this $6.9 million are funds that are placed into a special reserve that can only be used for specific purposes, like public open space development. Another portion of the $12.6 million is $1 million has been received as non-monetary contributions income. So this $1 million from developers are in non-monetary forms. For example, in as assets like footpaths and drains supplied to council as parts of developments. And thirdly, within the 12.6 million, there are 2.8 million of capital grants income, which is specific again for capital works projects. So if we add that all up, that leaves us with an underlying surplus of just $1.9 million, which, as part of the adopted budget that we've seen, has already been allocated towards the funding for Council's $49.9 million capital works program for 2021. So although in accounting terms it is called a surplus, this $12.6 million has already been allocated to various community initiatives. I suppose to finalise this question, Council really has played a key role in providing financial assistance to the community to ensure that our businesses, clubs and most vulnerable residents are supported through the COVID-19 pandemic in a sustainable way. I hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you, Mr. Lee. In terms of the second question about can councillors say do they truly represent the community? Well, on behalf of my fellow councillors, I'm very confident that I can say that our councillors represent our community. The councillors that I've worked with over the last 4 years work very hard on behalf of their community. They work very hard on this budget. We began working on this budget in November and spent many months working through the detail of the budget, the detail of the capital works program, the challenges that we faced with the impact of COVID on the budget, the challenges where we incurred additional costs and lost revenue as a result of the COVID-19 virus, and the challenges that we would face in expanding or in maintaining services in our community. There is a simple reality with the mechanics of a council budget. If you run at a deficit, then you build up debt or you run down your reserves. And those reserves are there, they're hard earned, they are there to contribute to major capital works projects. So in years when we have a definite cash surplus, the cash surplus goes into reserves. And then in subsequent years when we have major capital projects, the reserves are drawn upon to fund that capital works. For example, in the year when we had the basketball stadium built at Mullen Reserve, we had a very substantial building of around $20 million built. We drew on the capital reserves that have been built through cash surpluses and through the reserves that are in the Parks and Reserves Fund and Development Contribution Reserve Fund. So the process of a council budget is very complex. It isn't as simple as just seeing a number as a surplus and assuming that that's cash that the council has available. It's not how it works. And the councillors have been very judicious in ensuring that we have a balanced outcome. We have put a substantial $3 million fund on the table this coming financial year in terms of our COVID response. Those funds are very carefully targeted to the people who are most in need in our community. It could have been done through not taking a 2% rate rise, but then we would have been in an even more difficult position in trying to provide services to those most at risk and most at need in our community. And the decision we took as a council was unanimous. It was to put in the 2% rise. It's an average impact of $36 on an average of $36 per ratepayer. That is a modest amount when spread over a year. It's less than $1 a week. And that provided us millions of dollars to put into the community to those most in need and most under stress in the current environment. And we believe that that was an equitable and balanced outcome as a council, and is us representing the best interest of the entire community by providing support to those who are most in need. And for one, I am very proud of the decision the council made and the cohesive way that the councillors work towards that goal. Of course, the other challenge is if you start to cut revenue from council, you then have to start to pick and choose what services will you cut. Because in the end, council spends every one of its dollar on building community assets and on providing services into the community. And if you want to cut revenue of council, you have to cut services and have to cut employment, because they're the places that our money goes. When we build things in the community, we spend that money on businesses in the community. If we don't build as much, we are reducing the actual economic activity in our city. So it is a very difficult balancing act that the councillors have to go through. But even then, we managed to absorb millions of dollars worth of extra costs. We absorbed $750,000 worth of extra costs in waste charges, which are additional taxes placed on the council by the state government. Single source of that increase of $750,000 cost is increase in tax from the state government. We've absorbed that and we haven't passed that rise in costs onto the community. So the waste charges have been frozen. That's a portion of the charges council have where we haven't passed costs on to the community. So as I said, I'm very pleased with the efforts of this council to have a balanced outcome for the benefit of our community, and that's what we were elected to do, and that's what we've done as a council, I believe. But I do thank you for the question. It has provided us an opportunity to explain some of the challenges and the mechanics of a budget, and it's part of the learning process that every council goes through as when people join the council. So I think we have one other question.
Do I get to say anything or not?
Well, you've had your questions, Stella, and that's the point. Is you've tabled your 2 questions, and if you have further questions, you're welcome to put them in writing and send them through to the council, and they will be responded to in due course.
Okay, just want to say that there are people who don't qualify for council relief but are still suffering from financial and mental stress. We just cannot say that exist. But thank you anyway for this opportunity.
We agree, Stella. We do agree those things exist, and we do everything we can to support them. And that's why one of the key things that we've done is provide a lot of grants into community support agencies who are best placed to target their support to those people in our community, because they're the specialists in the field, and we think they're the people who are best placed to do that on behalf of council. So thank you for your question, and thank you for your time this evening. We do appreciate it. So we have one more questioner on the line. I do apologise for the technological hurdles that have hurt us this evening. So we have Mrs. Downey on the line who has a couple of questions as well. So hopefully that has now worked. Are you able to hear us, Mrs. Downing? We can't hear you at the moment. Are you able to press **6 on your phone to switch the mute off?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you. It's wonderful that council... Can I ask a question?
Please, proceed.
It is wonderful that council is looking at providing Wonga Park residents with some new revamped play spaces. It has been a long cry by Wonga Park residents that they are the forgotten part of Manningham. However, these residents are upset that they were not consulted before the 3 options were put on Your Say Manningham. I believe that most would not have known about this consultation if I hadn't found it and brought it to their attention on a community Facebook page. I was surprised to be asked by one councillor if I had a feeling for the community usage of Dudley Reserve compared to Goolagooch, i.e. one which should be the destination play space. If councillors were in touch with the community, they would know. I have been asking for Goolagooch to be maintained for over 4 years. For reasons unknown, officers decided no maintenance would be done. Naturally, it is deteriorating, but I'm told it is nothing that can't be fixed. The Wonga Park play space, based on the story My Grandmother Lived in Goolagooch by Graham Bass, has recently attracted a lot of attention from the local community and has been written about in the Herald Sun. The play space is much loved by the community. It is important to note that the current consultation does not include an option to maintain Goolagooch. Whilst it is pleasing to note that the consultation deadline has now been extended and a forum has been established, there is still no option to retain Goolagooch. My question is, Why has council failed to do the necessary maintenance of the playground, and why wasn't the community consulted before money was spent on drafting the concept plan?
Thank you for your question, Mrs. Downey. I'll refer the matter to Niall Sheedy, the Acting Director of City Planning and Community, to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mrs. Downey, for your question. We certainly agree that the play space is unique and has provided considerable value to the community over the years. Council has regularly maintained the facility since it was constructed. However, unfortunately, the lifespan of timber construction is not as durable as other materials. Therefore, we are required to upgrade the playground to ensure it can comply with the Australian standard for playground safety. The material that is currently being exhibited to the community are examples only, as a concept design has not yet been determined. The design of the new play spaces will be developed from the feedback received from the community and presented to the community once again later in the year for further feedback and consultation. Project officers will also liaise closely with community representatives, historical societies and others to contribute to the process to provide an appropriate play space for Wonga Park.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Sheedy.
you.
I believe you have a second question, Mrs. Downey.
Yes. And so just a bit of housekeeping. I asked that the honour boards be removed and kept in a safe place while renovations of the Warrandyte South Community Hall were taking place. The hall looks fantastic, and I'm so happy for the community that it now has a wonderful, usable facility. Likewise, the weather vane, a wonderful piece of artwork, was removed when renovations of the Donvale Bowls Hockey Club took place. I know the clubs, with whom I still have contact, were anxious for it to be reinstated. The weather vane used to reside in Lee Harrison's office. I don't know where it is now. Maybe you can enlighten me. Have the honour boards in the Warrandyte South Community Hall and the weather vanes removed from the Donvale Bowls Hockey Club during renovations being reinstated? If not, why not? Does council still have these important historic items?
The Mayor has frozen.
I think the Mayor has frozen there. So Niall, she was going to take that.
I am back.
Question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for your second question, Mrs. Downey. In regards to the weather vane at Donvale Bowls Hockey Club, officers have had stored the weather vane in storage to keep it safe and are planning to reinstall it during the financial year. In regards to the honour board's location, we are chasing up their location. However, it's fully intended that those boards be reinstated at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And if you talk to Jenny Horvath, she knows where they're kept.
Thank you.
Thank you for your questions this evening. Okay, we have a couple more questions from other members of the public this evening. So we have 2 questions submitted tonight, which will be read by our CEO, from questions from Mrs. Leanne Johnson. Mr. CEO, you will need to unmute.
Sorry, Mayor, I actually had Mr. Watson's questions coming up first. So coming up next. Sorry. Are you happy for me to go with Mr. Watson's question?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, please.
Great.
Yep, we'll come back
so,
to
I won't read the entire preamble. That will be referenced in the minutes. However, there are 2 key points from Mr. Watson's question, and that is an EPA State Environmental Protection Policy AQM study for air quality, a legislative requirement not done in the EAS must be done, and a properly supervised road traffic nighttime noise impact study for years 27 and 2047 by NELP is not done in the EAS and must be done. So Mr. Watson's questions are, will Manningham Council take legal action against NELP and the EPA, forcing them to comply with legislation and do a proper state environmental protection policy AQM impact study for air quality? And his second question is, will Manningham take legal action via VCAT to force NELP to do a surface road nighttime noise impact study for years 2027 and 2047.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I'll refer those two questions to Noel Sheedy, the Acting Director of City Planning and Community, to respond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mr. Watson, for your questions. Council does not intend to take legal action on either of these two matters. However, we will continue to monitor and advocate strongly to NELP and other state authorities to ensure that environmental standards relating to air quality and noise pollution, among others, are adhered to as required under relevant legislation and the project's environmental requirements.
Thank you, Mr. Sheedy. So we also have a question this evening from Mr. Clark Stevenson, for which the CEO will read the questions.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Stevenson's question is, in April, we had Super Seal, Deep Creek Drive and some surrounding roads with Super Seal. Outside number 42 to 44 Deep Creek Drive, the sealant has lifted off the road. Does the job by Super Seal have a warranty? If so, can you please arrange a repair? And also, outside number 56A Deep Creek Drive, at least 3 cars have slid off the road in the wet since the Super Seal installation. Could the council look at some traffic calming measures to avoid a possible tragedy on that sharp bend?
Thank you, Mr. CEO. I'll pass that question to Rochelle Quattrucci, the Director of City Services, to respond, and she has joined the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson, for your question. Council officers have been monitoring the condition of the new road surface since the installation, and we are aware that the road seal product has not adhered correctly to 4244 Deep Creek Drive, and this has been discussed with the contractor. As with most road resurfacing treatments, the material is weather dependent and relies upon adequate air and surface temperatures for installation or repair. Therefore, the contractor has committed to repairing the surface once the weather improves, and we expect that once the daily temperatures increase and wet weather reduces, that these defects will be rectified. In relation to the concerns relating to the Cool Seal product in wet conditions, council officers have raised this matter of skid resistance directly with the contractor. And in preparation prior to product installation, officers had researched and understood that the surface treatment had good skid resistance qualities that were actually greater than an asphalt surface. We are, however, aware of the reports of inadequate skid resistance in wet conditions along Deep Creek Drive, and this has been raised directly with the contractor, and we're awaiting a response. Council does not normally install traffic calming measures to roads that have low speed and low traffic volume environments such as Deep Creek Drive with predominantly local traffic. Council's traffic engineers have inspected the road and believe that a combination of painted centreline and raised reflective pavement markers are sufficient to guide motorists around bends in 50 km/h speed limited roads. It is, however, noted that some of the raised reflective pavement markers are missing and that these are to be replaced. But we will also continue to monitor and review if further treatment measures are required. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Ms. Quattrucci. Appreciate the response. So we have one more questioner for this evening. These questions were submitted by Ms. Leanne Johnson, and they will again be read by the CEO.
Thank you, Mayor. The first question is, why has a pay rise been approved for councillors and mayor in the current pandemic environment?
I'll refer that question to Andrew McMaster.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Johnson, for your question. Just for some background, at least once every year, the Minister for Local Government reviews the appropriateness of allowance categories for each council in Victoria. Manningham Council was advised in December last year that following a ministerial review, the Minister had approved a change in Manningham's allowance category from Category 2 to Category 3. Following that change in category, Council commenced a review of the councillor allowances that apply to our councillors and the Mayor in accordance with the Local Government Act. And we invited feedback from the community on the proposal to change the allowances in accordance with the Minister's change of category. At the Council meeting in April 2020, Council decided to defer the consideration of the review of allowances until after the October local government election. And in the resolution, which I'd invite you to review in the minutes for the April meeting, the Council noted and had specific regard to the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic in that decision to defer. Accordingly, there has actually been no pay rise or change of allowances by Council during this pandemic. The question of councillor and mayoral allowances will be one for the new council following the October election. Thanks for your question.
Thank you. And there is a second question from the same person.
Thank you, Mayor. And the second question from Ms. Leanne Johnston is, council rates across metropolitan Melbourne have been reduced in this pandemic environment. Why hasn't Manningham's been reduced? And I'd just make a comment that that was obviously a question from earlier on in the evening and was addressed by the Director of Shared Services.
Great, thank you, Mr. CEO. I believe that is the last of the questioners for this evening. We're moving on to the next item, but before we do, I would like to apologise for the few technical glitches that we experienced in the process of getting our questioners online this evening. However, it was we would prefer, if we are able to have the questioners come in, even though it's an electronic meeting, to ask the questions themselves, because we think it is a preferable model. So we will, I hope, the new council, I hope, will be continuing with this process, as will this council as its last meeting in September. We are up to item 8, admission of urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. Item 9, planning permit applications. There are no planning permit applications. Item 10, city planning and community. 10.1, the regional local government homelessness and social housing charter. Do I have a mover for this particular matter? Councillor Piccinini.
Thank you. I move that the recommendation on the papers be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Galbally. Over to you, Councillor Piccinini.
Thank you. 13 Eastern and Southern Eastern Councils convened at Monash Council last November to develop a regional local government charter to respond and advocate for an increased supply in social housing. The charter is in our papers and it's already been endorsed by several councils, including Knox, Whitehorse and the Yarra Rangers, and tonight we are also asked to endorse it. As you'll see from the next reports, there's a significant dearth of social housing in metropolitan Melbourne, leading to an increase in homelessness and all the social ills that follow, such as an increase in mental illness, disruption to children's schooling and family violence. Sometimes people say, well, it isn't the responsibility of a local government to deal with social housing because housing is a state government issue. But I say that every level of government should play their part. We've all been elected to put the best interests of our community first, and there are things that local governments can do to increase that social housing stock in our community. Some people also say that homelessness in Manningham is really not a problem. We don't see people in Manningham sleeping rough on the streets, and we're a relatively well-off community. So is it really a problem in Manningham? When one looks at the figures, we actually have relatively low numbers. The 2016 census stated that there were 215 homelessness people in Manningham, and compared to our neighbouring suburbs, that figure's quite low. Whitehorse was 747, Burundara was 426, and out in Dandenong it was over 2,000 people were homeless in Dandenong. But I'd question whether this is partly because there's such a dearth of social housing in Manningham. We only have 290 social housing dwellings in Manningham. About 170 of them are owned by the state government, so they're permanent housing, and about 120 are owned by housing associations like the Community Housing Limited, which are not-for-profit organisations. Our neighbouring municipalities have many more social housing stock, much more social housing stock than we do. I'd say that one of the reasons we have possibly one of the reasons we have less homelessness in Manningham is because if you become homeless in Manningham, you can't stay, you have to leave. And I say that because there's just nowhere else for you to go. And I say that this isn't fair. It doesn't align with our values of a harmonious community where we believe in inclusiveness, resilience, safety, and connectedness. If you become homeless in Manningham because you lose your job and you can't pay private rental, you have to leave. If you become homeless in Manningham because of family violence and you can't stay in the area, well, you can't move back when it is safe to do so because there's very, very limited social housing stock. And this simply isn't fair. It's not fair to the children who have to be pulled out of their schools. It's not fair to our children who lose their friends. It's not fair to the families that have to leave their community, their clubs, their sporting clubs, their faith communities. And it's not fair to our community who lose these people. So, I would urge the councillors to support the charter that is in our papers, but also I would urge them to stand strongly behind it, because this charter is about values, and values start from the top. Values start from our leaders. And the values behind this charter are our values of togetherness, diversity, and compassion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Gelberling. You'll need to unmute.
Thank you. And thanks to Councillor Puccinini. I obviously agree with everything you've said. And I think together the 13 councils, with their advocacy and pushing for mandatory inclusion zoning, I think is something that we really should get behind. And as Paula said, although we don't have a high rate of homelessness, I think she nailed it. The reason is because they can't afford to stay here. We have high domestic violence in Manningham. We have the same as anyone else, and percentage-wise. And we don't see so much of it because once they come out of the refugee housing, there's nowhere else for them to go locally. They have to go out of Manningham because they can't afford to stay where their kids are growing up and going to school. And I think the most powerful action that local governments can take to reduce the homelessness is for us to support delivery of homes and that people can afford in their area of choice and where they live. And by partnering with state and federal and public and private sectors, we can coordinate the approach to increase social housing in the Eastern region, and it can be achieved. And the urgency for acting in this space has been magnified now due to COVID-19. I think everyone knows the expectation of more jobs lost, more homelessness, more people getting evicted, more domestic violence because of these times, that we really should be acting and as soon as possible. To sign off, I would just like to thank the initiative of Monash Council for bringing this to the fore and connecting all 13 councils in the Eastern region. And I support, and I hope you all support the acceptance of this charter. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any other speakers for the motion? Councillor Zafiropoulos.
I think the mover and the seconder have covered this topic very well. I just wanted to reinforce some of the comments that Paula made. I think it's important for us to refer to a consultant's report for Manningham, which was handed to us, I think, towards the end of 2019, which found that at Manningham, there are 970 very low income and 320 low income households experiencing severe rental stress. What does that mean? It means that they provide 50% of their household income for rent. And as you know, social housing requires about 25%, or community housing about 30%. So when you dispose 50% of your income, the next stage is homelessness. That's one thing. One more thing, I think it's important for us to sign this agreement, this charter, because we will then become signatory to a submission to the federal government. The federal government plays a very important role, and the state government, in relation to this issue. So we can only do a small bit on our own. We need to advocate for the other two levels of government to play the game and not just talk about homelessness and provide the necessary money. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers for the motion or against? Does the mover wish to sum up? Great, thank you. I will therefore put the motion. Those for, please raise your hand to indicate your support. I see all hands are raised. That is therefore passed unanimously, councillors. Thank you. Item 10.2, Shram's Cottage Museum Complex Proposed Visitor Centre Concept Plan. Do I have a mover for this particular matter?
Yes,
Councillor Haynes.
I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Chen. Councillor Haynes.
Well, I don't want to take up much time at all. The recommendation is quite clear. The Shram's Cottage Museum Complex is a proposed visitor centre. It's really exciting. The Doncaster Temple Historical Society has been working with council for a number of years to get something on this site that will fit some of their needs. It is 1991 was the last time there was any significant change on that precinct. So this is a really exciting concept plan, and now that it's been very much discussed and it's in architectural development phase, and the architects has been in close consultation with the Doncaster Temple Historical Society. So without going into too much of this, I'm really excited that we will be able to continue to move forward on behalf of our community and the historical areas that need to be able to help the youth and residents get to know more, and even through the school visits and other community group visits that will be able to go there. There'll be so much education and training, and the talent of the Historical Society will be able to share a lot of that with our community greater once this visitor centre is put forward. So I'm really excited to put this motion up, the concept plan, and provide the support needed to get into the detailed design so the visitor centre can get up and running before we lose any more of our lovely historical people during this time. I'm so glad that at this time, during COVID-19, we have been able to help get this across the line and give people hope for the future, that we're not just sitting here going through a pandemic, that we are actually working on behalf of the community to show that what we're going to do in the future is going to help connect us all more and support us coming together. So I'm asking all of the councillors to not only support this, but even to encourage the officers to move it forward as quickly as possible. So that's all for me. And we've lost Paul, so maybe Andrew Day, would you like to
might hand over to the Deputy Mayor, Councillor Zafiropoulos. Are you happy to take over?
Okay, well, maybe I can ask for the seconder to speak. Anna, would you like to speak?
Oh, thanks, Dot, for
Sorry about that,
taking the chair. Oh, there he is. He's back.
Sorry about that. The internet provides another interesting glitch for the evening.
Or you might want to, I've finished, so you might want to ask Anna.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chan, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Grant's Cottage Museum is Manningham's link to the past. It includes German settlement of Wardle and the fruit growing, because Doncaster Templestowe was the leading orchard area in Victoria at that time. It is hard to imagine that the cottage was once threatened with demolition for the widening of Doncaster Road. I'm glad to see the project is finally and formally on the agenda, is progressing well. Because it is our responsibility to preserve the past and enhance it for the future generation. So personally, I can't wait to see the detailed design. And I'm hoping to see it presented to us and the community in the very near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers against the motion? I don't see any. Are there any other speakers for the motion? Councillor Piccinini.
I'd just like to say that this project and this issue has spanned the entirety of our 4-year term. And if there's a time when I would have wished the Manningham leader was still up and running, it would be now, so they could do a follow-up story, because this really is a good news story. It's a fantastic result for the community and for the Templestowe Doncaster Historical Society. As I do feel that we were at a crossroads, that it was time for the council to step in to consolidate and honour our history of settlement of the Manningham area. The Doncaster Historical Society, it's 50 years old, and they put in a Trojan effort over the years to establish what they've established. They even moved Shram's Cottage by hand all those years ago. But it was time for us to step in and build a fit-for-purpose facility for our community for years to come, so that we can educate our youth and our future generations about the wonderful history that we do have here. So it's a great result. It's something to celebrate. I really look forward to visiting the new centre one day.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers for the motion? Any speakers against? There's been no speakers against, so I'll therefore put the motion. Please raise your hand to indicate support. I see all hands are raised, therefore the motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We will now move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 10.3, the Ruffy Lake Park Draft Master Plan for consultation. Do I have a mover for this particular matter? Councillor Zafiropoulos. Just hold on a sec, please, Councillor. We'll need to just unmute you so we can hear you.
Okay.
That's great. We can now please proceed.
Okay, right. Look, we're talking about Ruffy Lake Park. In our papers, we describe it as the green jewel of Manningham. It's definitely the premier park, which serves not only our regional community, but also communities beyond Manningham. The new master plan includes projects that will provide positive social, environmental, and passive recreational benefits to a broad section of the Manningham community. So the improved open space will have a significant benefit to the community's health, social connections, and livability. Basically, the recommendations request approval of the landscape master plan to proceed to community consultation. Already, to build this draft plan, we consulted with the community, and we had a massive number of people, 800 in fact, community members provided input and influenced the way the draft plan was prepared. Of course, we also had a reference committee which included 7 community members and a number of other people like representatives from Melbourne Water, I think, landscape architect, and of course our officers. The top 5 key matters of importance to the community, according to the consultation, were 1, toilets, 2, trees, 3, car parking, 4, dog off-lead areas and walking paths, and 5, bushland areas. Now, a lot of the planning for that for the park is outlined in the papers. I'm not going to go through them unless it's necessary. I think it's vitally important for us to undertake those works. We set aside 4 years to complete all the works, and we have some $3.5 million, which will make the park even better than what it is. I urge you, councillors, to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Piccinini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Zafiropoulos is right. Ruffy Lake Park is referred to in our community as the jewel of Manningham. Many people walk it daily. I walk it about 3 or 4 times a week with Daisy, my dog. And this is an excellent master plan for draft for our community to comment on. A lot of work has been put into this master plan, and I commend the officers. It's well thought out. Now, I could be a little picky about some of the proposals, such as dogs being on lead in existing bridges in off-leash areas, which doesn't seem to be terribly practical in my view, but I'll put that issue aside to highlight some of the exciting proposals in the master plan. Firstly, there's a proposal for a cafe. It's the number 2 big idea that's come from the community responses. The number 1 big idea was more trees. Number 2 was the cafe. Also, there's a proposed boardwalk on the north side of the lake. And what this will do was it will complete a low-level path going around the entirety of the lake and the creek, making it much more accessible to our ageing community and also people with disabilities. So I think this is a brilliant idea. Together with, there'll be there's proposed to have a youth adventure playground in the park, and certainly that is complementary to the rural natural nature of our park, and certainly that's a gap in facilities or services in our community, services for the youth. So that's really great. Of course, the Frisbee 9-hole golf course is proposed to move to 18, and that's becoming more and more popular year in year. So I think the community will be really excited by this plan. I think it's really well thought out. There's a lot of great ideas. It'll enhance an even wonderful park, even more wonderful park. And it's proposed to be an 11 million investment over 10 years. And really this is what local council should do. And that is to, invest in our public open spaces. Because that's the number one thing that people say that they love living in Manningham for. What they love about Manningham is our public open space, and Ruffy Lake Park is the jewel of Manningham. So it's a wonderful plan. I commend it. I commend the officers, and I'm looking forward to see what the community says about it.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any other speakers for the motion? Councillor Chen.
And my fellow councillors has sounded all the beautiful recommendations, wonderful recommendations to the to Ruffy Lake Park in the proposed management plan. But I would also like to give special mention to residents who voiced no change in the surveys. No change ranks high in a range of consultations. It is obvious that the residents appreciate the large open space and do not want to spoil the nature left for Doncaster. And it reminds me that the Henry David Thoreau once said, "We can never have enough nature. We all love nature and value the natural landscape." But I really encourage these residents to get actively involved in the public consultation of the draft master plan, because officers will take into account all voices and opinions in the future design and works. That is extremely important to have your voice heard. Don't be put off because of your voice no change. And it is important you stand out again to have your voice heard. And that is the recommendation I have for those residents who voice no change, and your opinions will be really valued. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers for the motion or against the motion? In that case, I will put the motion. Those for, please raise your hand to indicate assent. I see all hands raised, therefore everyone is in support. That motion is passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors. It's great to see the draft plan going out, laying out the future of this reserve for the next decade or more. The Community Grants Policy Review, item 10.4. Do I have a mover for this particular matter? Councillor Conlon.
So I'd like to move that the recommendation be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Galbally. Councillor Conlon.
I think you said Councillor Conlon, but I'll just go on anyway. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillors, this is a significant policy, and it's actually the second time we've looked at it in our term. You might recall about a year ago, we looked at this, a revised version of what was previously the policy. And as a result of that, we asked at that last council meeting when we looked at this, we requested that officers have another look at it and that we develop a better policy. And I'm glad to see that we have come so far actually in this particular area. So I'd like to firstly thank you, the officers, for hearing the concerns of councillors and the community, and as a result, I think it's delivered. They've delivered a much better policy. I'd actually like to point out that there is improved alignment of grant applications with council priorities as a result of this policy through a mechanism where, for the community grants program, the council will, before it goes out for advertisement, council will actually be able to decide on the priorities for that particular program. There's also significant changes in the funding streams have been removed so that All applications will be now assessed on merit, regardless of the nature of the initiative. And there will also be no minimum funding amount available, meaning smaller scale initiatives can request multi-year funding rather than reapply year by year. And I know this is a great improvement for those small organisations that just need that that bit of money every year to keep doing the great work that they have been doing and not have to worry about having to apply every year. Also, the small grants will be open all year round, which is a great improvement. And following the endorsement of this policy, the guidelines will be clearly detailed every year, including the methodology, and evaluation criteria, and that'll be approved by council. So there's some great improvements here, and particularly in terms of transparency. And I think it's a great reflection of our values, actually. So our first value was that we've decided as councillors that we'll work together. So this is a good example of us working together, but not just that. It's an example of how we can work together with the community. This is a critical part of our community engagement and empowering, which is another one of our values, empowering our community in these in doing the great work that they do. So it relies on those partnerships, those fantastic partnerships with volunteer organisations, and how we can best help them. One of the objectives actually is in the policy is around value. Provide a measurable, cost-effective and efficient means to deliver community outcomes in a transparent and accountable manner. And that's under our grant program objectives. I'd also like to, as I said, this is another one of our values is accountability, and this definitely improves that in terms of our transparency. It respects the role of councillors and officers in the process, another one of our values, and it's a step towards excellence, another one of our values, because this is a significantly improved policy from when we started 4 years ago. So I encourage the councillors to endorse this wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Galvin.
Yeah, I also ask you all to endorse the grant program policy. One item that I'd like to point out is the fact that it's also going to be encouraging more and make it a lot easier for applications from non-English speaking groups as well. It's actually, this new policy is actually covering a lot of streams that we haven't actually looked at before. And what I particularly like is the fact that the arts and culture and the festival and events grants are going to be separately assessed. So I think that division's a good one. It's a vast improvement of our previous grants policy, and also with this, we also asking you to endorse the Community Grants Program Assessment Panel, their terms of reference, and of course, as we all know, it'll come forward to the new council to have a look at the guidelines and assess it again then. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers against the motion? Any other speakers for the motion? Councillor Zafiropoulos.
A point, the policy incorporates also the heritage grants, which used to stand on its own. And whilst the heritage grants will continue to have their own criteria and their own programming guidelines, I'm glad that they have been incorporated in our overall policy of granting.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers for the motion or against it? There being none, I will therefore put the motion. Please raise your hand to confirm your support. I see all hands raised. Thank you, councillors. That motion is supported unanimously. Thank you. We are on to item 10.5, the sponsorship policy review. Do I have a mover for this particular matter? Councillor Chen.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kleinert. Over to you, Councillor Chen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a review of Council's sponsorship policy 2012. The most significant change in the policy is provision for Council to sponsor external events or activities. For example, if a sponsorship request is received from a third party, Council will require the third party to present a prospectus to Council detailing all benefits and obligations. This policy applies to all cash and in-kind support, such as officers' time, traffic management, and materials. But Council will not enter into sponsorship agreement with any external parties if their primary operation or product involves political parties, tobacco, gambling, alcohol, sex industry, or portrays a negative emphasis on gender, race, sexual preference, religious belief, marital status, or physical or mental disability. Mr. Mayor, local businesses and large companies can demonstrate good corporate citizenship and positive investment within the community, and Council will promote these sponsorship opportunities on Council's website and by engaging with eligible organizations and companies to attract potential sponsors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chen. Councillor Kleiner.
Nothing further to add.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers against the motion?
Question.
You have a question, Councillor Haynes, please.
My question is, does Council have any sponsorship agreements at the moment?
I'll refer that to the CEO.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. I'll have to take that one on notice. We do have arrangements for particular events where we have sponsors involved with some of our events, but I can certainly come back to you with information in relation to that.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers for or against the motion? As there are no speakers against the motion, I'll therefore put the motion. Those for, please raise your hand to confirm your support. I see all hands raised. That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 10.6, the Reconciliation Action Plan Draft of 2021-23. Do I have a mover for this particular matter? Councillor Piccinini.
I move that the recommendation on the papers be adopted.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Galbally. Over to you, Councillor Piccinini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council formed a Reconciliation Action Plan Working Party, and we have before us tonight a proposed 4-year action plan that we are asked to give in principle support for it to be submitted to Reconciliation Australia for review and then for public consultation. The plan is in 4 parts, centering around the themes of relationship, respect, opportunities, and governance. And I'd like to thank the Working Party for all their hard work compiling this draft plan. There are a lot of great action items. And in particular, I'd like to thank our community members that were on the Working Party, Dale Wandon, John Baxter, and Karen Millwood. I'd also like to thank the contributions that were made by Auntie Gail Smith and Auntie Julianne Axford. I feel that there is greater appetite in our community for recognition of and reconciliation with our First Nations people. The community recently was asked to suggest some ward names for the new single wards, and many of them came up with Indigenous names. They proposed Indigenous names that were relevant to our local community. It's also evident that the Black Lives Matters movement has been embraced by mainstream Australia. And Dreamtime is now a highlight, if not the highlight, of the footy season for many of us. So community attitudes are definitely shifting. The Wurundjeri people were removed from Manningham in the 1860s. There were only about 15 or 20 Wurundjeri people left. Their tribe had been decimated by the effects of colonialisation. And what happened is they were placed on a reserve in Hillsville called Corranderk, and they were placed there with other members of other tribes from the Kulin Nation. And they lived there happily for a number of decades until they were once removed again from that reserve with the introduction of the Half Caste Act. Some of the Wurundjeri people moved to Tybe and the rest went to Geelong. And this is our local history, and every resident of Manningham should know that. Every resident of Manningham should know about our local Indigenous history. Just like they should know about our white settlement history, they should know that. What's interesting is that the Wurundjeri people really haven't moved back into Manningham. There's only 213 people who identify as Aboriginal in Manningham in accordance with the 2016 census. And I only know, and I believe there's only one Wurundjeri family that live in Manningham. And really, we've got to ask ourselves why. What are the barriers for the Wurundjeri people not moving back to country? Because why wouldn't they want to live here? There's clearly many significant sites for the Wurundjeri people in Manningham. There's many sacred sites. We have the Bullen Bullen Billabong. We have Pound Bend, where the Wurundjeri used to meet for thousands of years, where they last met with other members of the Kulin Nation before they moved on to Corranderk. Tikalara is full of Aboriginal middens. And William Barrack used to live along the river in Manningham. He used to walk along the river in Manningham. So we need to ask ourselves, why have the Wurundjeri people not moved back to country, and what are those barriers?
1 minute, Councillor.
Thank you. So this Reconciliation Action Plan tries to address some of those issues. There's a couple of really good constructive actions in this plan that I want to highlight. The first one is that we need to improve our recruitment processes at council, because out of 657 employees, not one of them identifies Aboriginal. And quite frankly, that's not good enough. We need to have our Indigenous people working and living in Manningham. We do have another action item is a social procurement strategy that removes the barriers for Indigenous people providing services, goods and services in to council. And we should celebrate that we do now have this policy, and I trust that we'll start to see some positive results. So
that's fine, Councillor. Would you like an extension?
No. So I commend the plan, and I seek that my fellow councillors vote in favour of this motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Goberling.
Unmute myself first. Thank you, Councillor Piccinini, once again. I think you've covered a lot of their history. I actually believe that that William Barrack was actually born in Wonga Park, and the history does fit very strongly from Wonga Park all the way down to the Yarra. And I've got to also add that the Wurundjeri people actually go past Manningham as well. So although they may not live within Manningham, their tribal land is a lot bigger than Manningham. And so they could be in a neighbouring suburbs, and even in the city of Yarra, which there's actually a plaque for William Barrack So, so that part of it, I think, is, you know, not such a big factor for me. But I noted that since Council's restructuring in 2019, we actually lost some key people and key links in Manningham with our Wurundjeri people, and the RAP plan sort of faded a little bit. That's why I really encourage you all to support this. It really strengthens our relationship, and it works towards a better cohesive plan to work together. And the reconciliation outcomes that the representatives have identified in this plan is for the draft for consultation. So, you know, let's hope it all goes through well. And I thank you all.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers against the motion? Any other speakers for the motion? There being no speakers against the motion, in that case, I will put the motion. Could you please raise your hand to show support? Or otherwise? I see all hands are raised in support of the motion. That motion is therefore carried unanimously, councillors. Thank you. Item 11, City Services, 11.1 Reich's Reserve Management Plan. Do I have a mover for this particular matter? Councillor Chen.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Haynes. Councillor Chen, to you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. In the year 2012, Council endorsed Restricts Reserve Management Plan. The plan was developed to set out the uses, objectives, and proposed developments for the reserve. This report provides an update on 4 actions identified in the plan. They are sports field reconfiguration, sports field fencing installation, Tom Kelly Athletics Track floodlight upgrade, and Tom Kelly Athletics Track car park upgrade. Some amendments to the plan are also proposed, such as construct an additional modular sporting pavilion on the western side of the sports field, upgrade to the sports field floodlighting, and incorporate floodlights for the hammer throw area. A new modular sporting pavilion on the western side of the sports field is supported by all tenant clubs. Once completed, it will be tenanted by the football and soccer clubs in winter and the cricket club in summer. The 2 overflow gravel car parks on the southern western side will be improved to service the pavilion. I'm pleased to see the long-awaited athletics track car park will be undertaken in this financial year. Council will take a coordinated approach to the car park upgrade and pavilion works. In terms of funding, Council has allocated $1.239 million within the 2020-21 budget for Restricts Reserve Management Plan implementation. Council has also received funding commitments from AFL Victoria, from Sport and Recreation Victoria, grants from the state and federal governments. Officers are currently awaiting the funding application of $350,000 to upgrade the athletics track car park. I want to thank our staff for actively securing every funding opportunity and Council's advocacy efforts to secure extra funding to deliver the projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Haynes.
Yes, I totally echo a lot of the things Councillor Chen has said, so thank you. I would just like to add, it's not only the sporting groups that are going to benefit from this. I'm really happy that the new plan that's come forward is not the same as the 2012 one. This has been one that's been adjusted because of the lots of communication and consultation with the officers and the work that they've been doing to work with all the different sporting groups and athletic clubs, and also the scouts and other community groups. From right through from the youngsters, the youth and the veterans, through the athletics, the sports, the soccer, the cricket and other groups, including the scouts, are going to benefit from this. This is going to be a really good outcome that I'm really happy that the officers have listened to the community, because it isn't the old 2012 plan. This is an adjustment to it. This is not, this new management plan right now will help get this across the line quite quicker because of the funding that Councillor Chen has mentioned. And I'm really excited that we've had officers and community and councillors working closely with these community groups to ensure we get a better outcome for our community. So this has been a difficult road, and it's been a worthwhile road, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the councillors support this and getting this up and running for the community. It's well overdue and a really good change, so I'm asking all the councillors to support this.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any other speakers for the motion? Councillor Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And look, I too am very pleased that what we're putting out on public exhibition has been adapted more recently. There have been people in council talking with, which has been very good, people that are in representatives of the club. And indeed, you know, it has been a lot of work for this one to come out, and there have been a lot of community people there with a great deal of angst in more recent times because of the formulation of a different plan of this. But this one here that's been tabled now really is the one that has had that community consultation. I congratulate council officers for actually finalising with this one, because it has had that consultation. And what is good is we are putting the pavilion where it should be, not where it might be convenient for someone to have it attached to another building. It's directed in the right direction. And I can name a number of buildings that we've built around Manningham that aren't in the right spot and aren't shaped correctly. And so this one here with that consultation will overcome that. It also overcomes a very important thing on that particular site, and that is not congregating everybody to the one entrance and exit for the use of the facility, for the athletics track and for the other activities that are going. So it's going to spread the people out around that block rather than all in one spot. And it also brings the activities for the athletics club down to that one location and not be spread up a hill that hardly anyone would go to for a gymnasium and all the rest. So in the end, our talking to the people has been good, and I'm glad it's come out like it has, because they were thinking they were getting somewhere, but then, you know, and they were in those discussions, and I think they'll be very, very happy with what is put in front of them now.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers for the motion? Councillor Kleiner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also speak towards endorsing this plan, the management plan that's coming into fruition, which I'm most excited about. And one thing that I think, which I'm not going to repeat what my fellow councillors have said, I agree with everything that's been said. But in addition to that, the excitement for this actual precinct, that tonight we have endorsed the Ruffy Lake draft plan and also the Strams Cottage Museum Complex Visitor Centre concept plan. It creates for our future an amazing precinct where it will bring together a collaboration of community from different ages, different backgrounds, different loves, whether it's that passive exercise, the historical love, the walking of, whether it's the park or the athletics track, and of course this Reichicks Reserve, which it just sits there so unloved and forgotten. So I'm so excited that tonight, when you look at how we shape the future of our city in coming years, we will see that in that little quadrant will be vibrant and alive and refreshed and renewed. And I think that's a wonderful thing that we as a council have worked very hard towards. I love the fact that this is going ahead, that it's in the budget, and it will be largely finished by the end of this coming financial year, which is most exciting. There's no more talking, it's actual action, and that's largely to thanks by the passion of those community groups that have tirelessly continued to be heard, and the work of our officers, which have worked with them, and I thank our officers for the work that they've done to create what I think is a really great and exciting future for Reichicks Reserve. So I'm really happy to see this be passed this evening.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers for the motion? Councillor Conlon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is, as we've heard, this is a great example of what happens when we collaborate and when we work together with the community. And I think it's a really good reflection, actually, of how far the culture within this particular organisation, within Manningham, has come. That we can actually sort of say, well, actually, maybe we don't have to do things just because they're on a plan. We will actually consult with people, and it's interesting. We have this argument, or we have this discussion every year around budget time about how far we've gone and with the capital works. But this particular delay in the capital works has been a good thing, because we've finally got a good outcome, rather than spending the money. A couple of years ago, I remember going down there, and I'd like to give a shout out to Lee Harrison, because he went down there. We spoke with Campbell and about the plans, and I think at that point, when Lee had seen sort of what was planned, maybe it wasn't such a good idea. So it's a great outcome, and thanks to the CEO for driving that culture within Manningham.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers for the motion or against? Councillor Zafiropoulos.
Look, at the risk of basically saying similar things to the others, I think this is an example of effective consultation. It's been mentioned by other speakers, but it does make me very happy that usually councils have the sort of the misrepresentation that they do what they like and they don't consult people. Here is an example that both the officers and council were willing to examine what they had in mind and change it because it made sense what the community was asking. I'm very pleased and I endorse the project.
Thank you, Councillor. I'd also observe, councillors, that there is another related project happening in this reserve, which is being funded by federal grant and state government grant, which is actually going to implement training level lights on the athletics track. And this complements work that I've seen in my 8 years on council, which has been resurfacing of this athletic track, rebuilding of cages in the athletics precinct. There's been a steady feed of upgrades to this particular reserve in the athletics precinct, and it's great to see the ovals are now going to be upgraded as well to give us another more functional ground for AFL, cricket and other ball sports. So all in all, what we're seeing is a great new strategic direction for this reserve. It's very much looking forward to seeing it be delivered. So with nothing further to say, councillors, I will, as there's been no speakers against, I will put the motion, those for. Those, thank you. I see all hands are raised. That is carried unanimously once more. Thank you all, councillors, for your input. Item 11.2, the relocation of neighbourhood safer places, bushfire place of last resort, from indoor to open spaces. Do I have a mover for this particular matter? Councillor Conlon.
So I'd like to move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Kleinert, over to you, Councillor Common.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, again. Yeah, this is interesting situation where we do have currently there's effectively 3 places, one near Warrandyte, one in Park Orchards and one in Wonga Park. We're going to basically have one in Wonga Park, one in Park Orchards and one in Warrandyte again. So very similar places actually to what they were. The main change is that we're going to open a space, and that's because Telstra, I shouldn't say Telstra, that's derogatory. NBN, whoever runs our communication system these days, can't guarantee the fixed line infrastructure to the indoor spaces, which means that they can't open the doors remotely for an indoor space if you need, if in a disaster where people may need to try and escape there. It is noted in the report that these neighbourhood safer places, bushfire place of last resort, NSP BPLR, is actually just a hypothetical thing anyway, because it says it may provide some protection from direct flame and radiant heat from a fire, but does not guarantee safety or survival. So hopefully people understand that, and that they actually try and get out early and stick to their fire plans. But it is important that we have these identified, and it's good that we've done the work necessary to be able to make these outdoor spaces comply with the relevant specifications for those areas. So I endorse this to the councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kleinert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the Victorian government established the neighbourhood safer places. Look, anything that will encourage a safer place for our community to be able to access in the fire season, should a situation arise, is a good thing. This is just a clear reminder to our community that sits in Warrandyte, Wonga Park, well, especially Warrandyte really, where access out is very difficult in a time of emergency. This reinstates some clear messaging again about, we are very much about that safety for our community. We have engaged with the recommendations that are supported by the emergency service agencies and the Manningham Fire Management Planning Committee. They work very well together, very closely, and it's all about safety of our community. A reminder that when the season comes and is ahead of us, that first and foremost that families are vigilant in their action plans, and should they feel that it's of concern, that they would consider that plan of exiting out, that God forbid that we would have to activate these places and people have to congregate, that it would be an easier access for them to get to. So it's all about that safer place. Totally endorse it. Let's hope we never have to use it in our community. We've seen what's happened, and let us not forget how real this is, and how real it is for us in Manningham. No matter where we live in Manningham, our community is complete as one. And it's something that gets reviewed every year, and council does work very closely with the agencies to make this better for our community. So a good outcome.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers against the motion? Any other speakers for the motion? Councillor Galbally.
I'll just be quick. Communication is going to be the most important thing to alert people of the difference between the emergency refuge centre and the neighbourhood safer places being really a place of last resort. It's not there for people to wait until the last minute and then say, oh, I can always go there at the last minute. It is really for unforeseen circumstances when you feel yourself really caught and you haven't had an option to sort of do anything else and escape with your family or your pets or your emergency plan. So I think communicating that is going to be very important for people to understand that's two differences. And on the other side, I'd like to note that out of the three places, like Dudley Road in Reserve is council land, and so is Domini Reserve. So for the Goldfields Plaza Shopping Centre, I really want to give a call out and thanks to all the shop owners there. It is under a body corporate, and we had to get their permission and get 75% votes to approve the place as area of last resort. So I'd like to thank the shops at Goldfields. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers for or against the motion? There are none. There have been no speakers against the motion, so I will now put the motion. Those for, please raise your hand accordingly. I see all hands are raised indicating support. That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 12, Shared Services, 12.1 Investment Policy 2020 Review. Do I have a mover for this matter? Councillor Goff.
Mr Mayor, I move as on the paper. The recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, councillor. Is there a second? Councillor Haynes. Thank you. Councillor Goff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. This is one of a number that are coming up tonight with the rollout of the new Local Government Act and getting our policies in line with the new wording of the Act and everything else. So there'll be a number coming up in the next few from the CEO. No, this one's investment policy. It's not from Shared Services, not the CEO, but the other ones come up in his department. But essentially what it is, and we've always had policies for what we do invest in, and this one is bringing it up to date, as I said, with the Local Government Act. And it really is the workbook for how and what we can and can't invest in. Now, there are some things that are prohibited by the Local Government Act and in the statement that we can't invest in. There are other things that we can invest in. And from my feeling of it, I think we have got a wider range, actually, these days of things that we can invest in as into the past. But I think councils beware, because the primary function of our investment, and it goes back into the aims and what it is to, I suppose, invest the money wisely and to really consider one of the most important things is not losing the money or letting it devalue in any major way. So, you know, the concern of ensuring that that money retains its same buying value into the future doesn't mean that we go out and we buy shares that could go really great or do everything like that or collapse. So it really outlines the sorts of institutions and the sorts of things, and also the proportions of money that we have, because throughout the year, if you can imagine, our rate revenue would be bringing in many, many millions of dollars that isn't spent straight away. And therefore we are parking it for some period of time, and we've got investments going on. So this is just the workbook in which we're going to adhere to at Manningham as our policies. And in the main, it really is for the officers who are working through this to work according to this policy that we've set out for them to work with, and to commit that they've got no pecuniary interests or other interests or any kickbacks with anything that's going on. And I think they have to sign something to say that they don't when the recommendations are made. So it is something that is, I suppose, a conservative way forward that allows us to, and the community, to feel confident that council won't fritter away or make unwise decisions in this regard. I just have to remember back to the Pyramid Building Society and the number of organisations, including councils and including schools, that lost their entire cash through that collapse. Now, I know that things have changed in the interim with some guarantees from organisations in the future, but this is money that we're holding on behalf of the community for that, and we've got some responsible safeguards outlined in our policy here. So I hope that all councillors vote for this motion.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Haynes.
Yes, I echo Councillor Goff's statements, because we've got 507 pages of today's agenda, so we do have other policies coming up. We have a Local Government Act for 2020 that begins implementation on the 1st of September. So I thank the officers that they are changing a number of policies. The investment policy, I'm not going to go over all of the changes, but interesting, when you're reading policies, it can add a bit of a what does that really mean? But one of them here says the selection, however, must also consider and not be in conflict with the other objectives in the investment policy. So these are things that we really do need to be mindful of. And it also states here the investment policy has been developed in line with the council plan theme of a well-governed council. So I'm really grateful that our officers are putting this together, and that they are doing it not only on behalf of the new Local Government Act and the rules, but also helping to review them to make certain we are getting the best outcome for the over $130 million worth of money that does get passed by the hands of council every year. So, and it just continues to go. So I'm really grateful that this policy is coming forward, and many other policies regarding the Local Government Act. And I just want to thank and commend the officers for continuing to make these changes to all these policies to get in line, and our CEO for the work that he's doing to lead all this direction. And I just commend this to all councillors. I don't think we really should even consider voting against anything like this. So I'm hoping we get all councillors. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any other speakers for the motion? There being none and no speakers against, I will put the motion. Please raise your hand to show your support. I see all hands are raised, therefore the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 13, the Chief Executive Officer. 13.1, the Manningham Quarterly Report, Quarter 4, April to June 2020. Do I have a mover for this particular matter? Councillor Kleinert.
That the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Zafiropoulos. Over to you, Councillor Kleinert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is basically the Manningham Quarterly Report, 1st of April to 30th of June. Basically the aims is to promote transparency and meet legislative requirements under the Local Government Act of 1989, and also the planning and reporting regulations of 2008. It basically covers the reports of capital works, finance and corporate performance. And I have to say, first of all, congratulate to firstly the CEO, to our directors, our managers and our entire staff who have been part of what I think is a commendable final quarter that we're endorsing and hopefully voting unanimously for this evening. Now, capital works, just give you a bit of a snapshot, 98% of the budget was delivered. That equates to basically of 310 projects funded in the 19 to 20. Of the 310, 291 were basically completed. Now, that is absolutely brilliant if you take into account from May 1st to that, in that quarter, we were dealing with a pandemic that nobody saw coming. In fact, nobody enjoyed it coming, nobody liked it staying, and certainly we're all wishing to say goodbye to it very quickly. So 94% was basically completed of the projects. If you look at the reasons why we weren't 100%, and let's look at that and look at that small percentage. It basically, Petty's Reserve Pavilion took a little longer than expected to go to market. These things happen. Clubs requested some delay, and that would be with regards to Domini Reserve, which highlights listening to our community, and change of design of Reichicks Reserve, which I'm so ecstatic that we have passed tonight. So great that those didn't go ahead because we're listening to our community. And the third one, of course, was the creating of the uncertainty of the delivery through COVID, which we as a local government complied to every regulation that the state government required us to do, just like every other business. We had no special exemption. We had no special, you know, we can do this because we're a level of government. No, we had to be really exceptional in showing safety for all our workers, both those that are out on the field and those that are internally. So really an amazing, that's a really amazing 94%. And if you think if we didn't have COVID, what would have we achieved? So that's really great. Financial performance was also covered. Again, favourable. And, you know, we incurred a 2.5 million financial impact as a result of COVID-19, as well as providing approximately 500,000 of COVID relief measures. So there was great explanation given earlier on by Philip Lee, and that was a really great, concise explanation to the community of, you know, some of the measures that we have undertook. Corporate performance, 88.2% of our business plan actions. Again, this is about meeting the council plan, which comes to an end in 2021, and that's for the new council to then do their 4-year financial plan. Great to see that it's currently 53 of the 57 actions undertaken. 11 of the 13 initiatives have been, well, they're completed. I think, no, hang on, 11 of the initiatives are at or expected targets is probably the correct. Look, I just want to highlight CEO key performance indicators. Our CEO has done an absolute stellar job. You know, it's a $150 million budget. It's over $2 billion worth of asset. If you collaborate our full-time staff, part-time and casuals, it equates to over 1,000 individuals. That is not something that is a 9-to-5 job. Oh, sorry, forgot the 9 councillors that are, you know, very, very demanding at times of our CEO, and see the smiles and the nods, because we are 9 individuals, yet our CEO has been very level-headed and very straight. We have 598 kilometres of road that could take us on a straight road to Hobart. You've done a wonderful job with you finally 16 indicate, not that it, well, maybe you want to drive to, you know, it's a straight road to Hobart. I worked it out, Jeff.
590k.
598 Ks, and that's our roads within Manningham.
No, is that? I think Tasmania is. Anyway.
So when you look at the for 2019-20, 16 indicators across that, he's had to monitor the strategic leadership, advocacy, service, capital works, accountability, innovation, a values-driven organisation. It's a great report. It's a great way for us to finish our last really complete of a financial year as this council. It's commendable what's happened in an amazing time of COVID. And I think we should be proud, and it takes that leadership, which is, you know, the councillors are the leadership, the CEO, you know, councillors, you know, the report is excellent, and I commend it to be voted for fully. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Zafiropoulos.
Mr. Mayor, I think Councillor Kleinert outlined the quarterly report in a detailed way. There's no need for me to add much. I think there's no doubt that the administration excelled, but an organisation of 600 or 700 people cannot excel unless they have an exceptional leader. So thank you, Andrew Day, for your leadership. Pass on the council's congratulations to your executive team, but also to all the staff. Look, the issue it's bad to praise yourself, and I would not like us to praise the council, but I think it's important given some of the criticism, and we had a question about us deferring. In fact, it was increasing our allowance when in fact we did not accept the increase. But I think it's important for the community to know that councillors, not only Manningham, every other council, have an allowance for their expenses. Now, the total allowance for Manningham was $117,535. Now, guess what these councillors spent for the year? They spent $28,748, which is 24% of their allowance. So in the present climate, where people are suffering in Manningham, we're definitely showing as councillors empathy for the pain and suffering, and we are willing to sacrifice our own sort of benefits in order for us to do the right thing by the community. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any other speakers for the motion? Being no speakers against and no further speakers, I will put the motion. Please raise your hands in support or against. Those for? I see all hands are raised. That is passed unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 13.2, Establishment of Audit and Risk Committee, Local Government Act 2020. Do I have a mover for this particular matter?
Mr. Mayor, I move
Councillor Haynes.
Recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder for this matter? Councillor Klein. Councillor Haynes.
This Audit and Risk Committee is updated since 1989. It's to be revoked because there's a new Audit and Risk Committee. It has chairperson, an independent person, and 2 councillors on it. The Audit and Risk Committee is one of the most important aspects of the internal works of Manningham because it actually helps address some of the issues that might come up through governance, and it's a really essential part of how local government works. And it's really good because it's internal and it very much focuses on how the processes and activities happen through council and risks them accordingly. So it's really good that that there has been an update in this Audit and Risk Committee charter, and it's been prepared with in accordance with the new Act, obviously. And it does have a really, really important role in Manningham Council and in every council. Without saying any more, the first meeting, I would like to share that the first meeting for this new Audit and Risk Committee, if we pass it tonight, will take place via video on the 4th of September 2020. And there has been a number of changes in their terms of reference and that too. So I'm looking forward to seeing that the Manningham Audit and Risk Committee continues to do a great job for us in the many years ahead as residents in Manningham. I ask that we pass this.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, this is an independent advisory committee, which has actually been going for the last 20 years. It's great because it's an oversight and great governance that next level that covers to make sure that we're governed very well. And just want to take the opportunity to thank those the independent members and our chair, so Teresa Glabin and Andrew Dix, who do work very, very hard. I've been on the audit committee. I think I did 2 years of it, and some of that reading sometimes it's an enormous amount of reading to go through. It's a really robust committee. So I don't want community to think this is something that's just been set up. This is something because of the Local Government Act. It's just restating it under the new Government Act of 2020. So thank you. And passing obviously with our fellow councillors, Councillor Piccinini and Councillor Goff, as the current councillors to remain on until the end of term.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any other speakers for the motion?
Just quickly, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Goff.
Yeah, look, thank you. Look, this Audit and Risk Committee, yes, it is, as we know, as what has been said, but just to clarify something, going back in a history lesson for our community, Manningham was one of the first to have independent people on an audit committee. Of course, the Auditor General and everything would be audited, and some places had some internal auditors and people that were looking in the organisation. But we actually inherited that from the people that were administrators of our council when we had the commissioners in, and they instituted at Manningham external representatives from the community on their audit committee, all right? And that's when it was introduced. So it's going back to the very formation of the city of Manningham, and then that was continued on with the elected councils in 1997. So basically we have had this working out, and it's been adopted by local governments across Victoria with that model, just like we were the first with the 3-bin system. So anyway, I just thought Councillor Kleinert mentioned the fact that it's been there for 20 years. We've had our audit committee from way before that.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers for the motion? As there's no one spoke against this motion, I'll now put the motion to the chamber. Those for, please raise your hand. I can see all hands are raised. That motion is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 13.3, governance rules. Do I have a mover for this particular matter? Councillor Goff.
I move the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, Councillor. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Galbally. Over to you, Councillor Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And again, this is another one that we're putting in with regard to the changes in the Local Government Act and looking at our procedures and things at council and a framework for governance. Some people might think it's ho-hum, but if you actually become a councillor, this is the most important document you can ever read, and I'm amazed that people don't actually read it when they're being a councillor, because it actually tells you the rules of engagement. But essentially it sets out quite clearly what council is and why it's here, and a governance framework that needs to be clear. And the concepts of fairness and being balanced, impartial and ethical really come out in the way in which we should be approaching things. And the concept is very high in the concept of natural justice being given to the people of our community in any rules and any way in which we go about making decisions. And also it really clarifies the fact that if we are making decisions that have an impact on an individual, affecting actually the people that are there, then we really need to consider that and show that we've considered it. So in other words, we've come up with the ways in which we, and it's sort of our rule book of how we engage, also with the community, but how we actually engage as a council, as an organisation making decisions on behalf of the people of Manningham. And, you know, it might be droll and drony to some people, our council meeting procedure, but unless we've got clear rules and regulations that we work through a council meetings become disorganised, unclear, and the actual outcomes of decisions would be completely lost in the discussions that are going on, and then it's up to interpretation. That does not happen at a council meeting. It is very clear, and these processes are put in to make it organised so everybody can follow it and everybody can see where the decisions have gone and how it's gone there, who can speak, when they can speak, and all of those things are put out in there. We've got procedures then that we've applied that to other committees. Now, we don't have many, but we can have some delegated committees in council make decisions on behalf of council. And, you know, this has bits into that as well. And these are groups that actually make decisions on behalf of council. When we get on to we've also extended it at Manningham, where we've got our rule books for our community committees and things like that on how they're done. But it also closes another thing, a very important element of being transparent, and that is the concept of conflict of interest and disclosure of interest. And also the one that we're going to be employing in a couple of weeks' time, the election period policy, and we've outlined clearly how we work during that time. These are important. It's important that we get it done because I think it needs to be in place by the 1st of September. So, councillors, we've done the work on it in the past. Congratulate the officers for going through it all. But it is a very important document for us, and it's a very important document for the I suppose, the clarity and comfort of the community in how council operates.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Goblin.
Thank you, Councillor Goff. I would like us to adopt this, and I think it's a really good policy or rule for us as a council, because it's really encouraging all councils to look at sustainability, not only in an economic sense, but also with our environment sustainability, and to actually push planning for climate change risks in our communities. So, and we're also looking at increasing the level of community engagement. And aligned with the Local Government Act of 2020, which is going to be the next one, between the two of them, we've got about 100 pages that would be a really good read material for any candidates that want to come into council, because as Councillor Goff said, you know, this is basically the Bible of council. We really need to know both the governance rules and the Local Government Act. It's a great guide for any wannabe councillors to have a good look at and get a strong idea of what's up ahead. And I hope we will pass this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any other speakers for the motion? As there's been no speakers against and no further speakers, I'll put the motion. Please raise your hand to confirm your support or against. I see all hands are raised in support. That motion is therefore carried. Thank you, councillors. Item 13.4, Local Government Act 2020, Governance Policies. Do we have a mover? Councillor Conlon.
I'd like to move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Goblin. Councillor Conlon.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, this is another important policy that in line with the Local Government Act, which basically changes from being prescriptive to being governed on principles, a principles-based approach to local government. And yeah, I appreciate the amount of work that the officers have put in to align our policies of both the public transparency policy and our council expenses policy with the Local Government Act of 2020. And I don't have anything further to add.
Right, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Goblin.
No, nothing to add.
Thank you. Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any further speakers for the motion? As there are no further, Councillor Zafiropoulos.
Look, I think we covered most of this in the previous motion and item. However, I think it is important for our community to know that the Act has made significant improvements in some areas that affect the community. And I'll just pick up one or two of them. One of them is that innovation and continuous improvement is to be pursued. In other words, it challenges the notion that if it's not broken, don't try to fix it. It asks us, this principle in Section 9 of the Act makes every council to look for better ways of doing things, more efficient things, improving service to the community with less cost and so on. So that's one principle. The other principle, I think Councillor Galbally already mentioned, it requires that we seek environmental sustainability. So climate change needs to be taken into account in a lot of the decisions we make. The other thing, of course, is community engagement and transparency. Are things that we've already had already, but it reinforces that those are important things if we are to reflect on community need. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers for the motion or against? There being none and there being no speakers against the motion, I'll put the motion to the table. Please raise your hand to confirm if you support the motion. I see all hands are raised. Thank you, councillors. That motion is carried unanimously. Item 13.5, revised instruments of delegation to the Chief Executive Officer and members of council staff. Do I have a mover? Councillor Kleinert.
I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Piccinini. To you, Councillor Kleinert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, this is just the revised instrument of delegation for the CEO and members of council staff. Basically, like it's the theme of this evening, this really, the delegation made by council under the previous Local Government Act of 1989 will automatically be revoked on the 1st of September. So hence all of these policies are having to be updated in line with the new Local Government Act. So as you can see, if you're listening to this riveting stuff, there is just a lot of work that has been done in the background by officers to get it up to scratch. But in short, it's something to note that in actual fact, council reviewed this on the 24th of March this year. It's not something that's often really reviewed to the extent that we actually did, and that was because we were prompted by the escalating COVID situation. It incorporated changes that enabled the CEO to exercise certain powers in defined circumstances, and basically, we were going through some stuff, and we needed to make sure that we were prepared as a council, that the CEO was equipped to do what needed to be done for not only to keep our city running, but also for the safety of our staff and just all that was coming ahead of us that we had no idea. So it is quite an important feature or policy of council. And so again, it's just really to get it in line with the Local Government Act in preparation for September 1st. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Klein. Councillor Piccinini.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As this is the last of the documents to align that we need to pass to align with the new Local Government Act, I'd just like to say a big thank you to the officers. And in particular, I want to do a shout out to Carrie Bruce, who's done an absolute power of work in a very, very short time to draft these documents, put them before us so that they can go out for public consultation and get them in front of us before the 1st of July. So it's a big thank you to Carrie Bruce. I've got a legal background, and what I can say is Carrie really considers every policy. She's got a very good eye for what needs to be considered, what needs to be addressed, and a beautiful writing style. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other speakers? Are there any speakers against the motion? Are there any other speakers for the motion? Well, I'd also like to echo the sentiments expressed by Councillor Piccinini in support of the governance team that have delivered an amazing piece of work in a very short space of time. The government didn't leave a lot of leeway for local government, the local government sector in the timing of the implementation of the legislation here. They did a pretty poor job, in my view, in the timing of the delivery of the legislation, leaving it to the last moment and pushing an enormous workload right across the local government sector. I'm very pleased and proud of the work that our particular governance team have done in delivering this in a timely manner, in a thorough and complete manner and professional manner. So they're to be commended for the no doubt many hours that they've put in over and above to get this done. Well done, and I'm pleased to see it go forward. So on that note, councillors, I'd ask you to raise your hands if you support the motion. Those for. I see all hands are raised. That is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 13.6, record of assembly of councillors. Do I have a mover? Councillor Chen.
I move that the recommendation be adopted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Conlon. Councillor Chen.
Nothing to add, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Conlon.
Nothing to add.
I'll therefore put the motion. Those for. That is carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. Item 13.7, documents for sealing. Do I have a mover? Councillor Haynes.
The recommendation be adopted.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder?
It's in the papers.
Councillor Kleinert. Thank you. Councillor Haynes.
Nothing further, just as in the papers, there's nothing to add. Thankfully, we don't have to read it out this time.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Kleinert.
Nothing to add, Mr. Mayor.
I'll therefore put the motion, councillors. Those for. Those, that is, I see all hands are raised. That is carried unanimously, councillors. Thank you. Item 14, urgent business. There are no items of urgent business. Item 15, councillor question time. Councillors, do you wish to raise any questions? I'm not seeing any hands raised. I see no. Oh, I have a councillor asking a question. Councillor Goff, you'll need to unmute.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're at a meeting last week, a Zoom meeting with the councils on a planning application, and it came up with an issue of the entrance of Robert Street and Manningham Road. I think it was Robert Street, wasn't it? Robert Street, yeah, and Manningham Road. It is a very difficult intersection, that one there to begin with. And the people around there were asking whether some parking restrictions may be instituted from Manningham Road to around King Street, which is the first road in, which would alleviate, a lot of cars do go through there from Templestowe Road across to Manningham Road, and it means that you miss the traffic lights at the corner of Bulleen Road and Manningham Road. And there is a difficulty even as in the turning left, and people will turn left and then do a U-turn into Manningham Road just there, and that turn, it is an issue. So there are two things I'm asking, whether we could actually refer that to see if we could A, consult with the community, and B, look at the flow of traffic on the left-hand turn, then crossing and doing a U-turn in Manningham Road there, and that's a Vic Roads road. I do understand that, but there are some issues with that. So there are two issues. One is the sight lines and the parking as people are turning left into that street in and around, and giving ease of traffic through that area. And the second part is on the U-turn in Manningham Road from that street, which again presented an issue. If we could have a look at that in the future.
Thank you, councillor. I'm sure the officers will take that question on notice and we'll have a look at it. I might also ask if the council staff, when they're looking at Robert Street, they could also similarly have a look at Helene Street, which is parallel to Robert Street.
Similar issues.
The reason that I ask is that those two streets are going to be under quite some pressure in the coming years with the development of the North East Link, and we should be given some consideration as to whether we can get some support from North East Link to put some traffic management in those streets. If we can't actually keep the traffic out, it's going to have to find some mechanism to keep the traffic calm as it traverses those streets. I presume that's in line with your request, Councillor.
Oh, it certainly is, because that Helene Street is the last street. It does not have a thoroughfare to the rest of that area. So anyone that lives in that little triangle does have to get out onto Manningham Road or Templestowe Road to get to anywhere else. If they had to go to Bulleen Plaza, they need to get onto those other roads because there's no thoroughfare through to them.
Thank you, Councillor. So we've passed that on to the officers. So are there any other questions, councillors? There being none, then we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you. Item 16, confidential reports. So councillors, we have a motion to close the meeting subject to the Act to deal with a confidential matter. Do I have a mover?
I'm happy to move a motion.
Councillor Conlon.
The council closed the meeting to the public pursuant to section S662A of the Local Government Act 2020 to consider item 16.1, proposed land acquisition concerning land use planning information, being information that if prematurely released is likely to encourage speculation in land values.
Thank you, councillor. Do I have a seconder for this particular matter? Councillor Piccinini. Councillors, this is a procedural motion, so I will now put to motion. Those for, please raise your hands to confirm your support. I see all hands are raised. That is carried unanimously. Thank you. To the members of the public who are watching the meeting on live stream, because this matter is going to be heard in confidence, we'll be ending this live stream and commence a closed meeting to consider this matter